Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. Or, yeah, probably not. The spotting system in this game isn't exactly reliable. Given that this is a YouTube video, though, you might be able to guess what happens next. My goal in this video is to explain to you how I approach defensive flying in War Thunder. Specifically in the situation where you have somebody diving in on you from behind and you don't have the time or space to just pull out of the way. Now, I should make the caveat that you should probably avoid being in the situation if possible, but obviously you can't dictate the terms of every fight. And this is really one of those situations that I see people, especially newer players, really start panicking because it really feels like you're just out of options. I want to convince you that even in this extremely disadvantageous position, you have some tricks that you can pull to not only survive, but maybe even turn the tables on your opponent. Let's get started. So this is a screenshot from DEFYN's defensive flying guide, which might be familiar to some of you. And my defensive flying strategy is a simplification of this one. In essence, what you want to do, according to this diagram, is you want to try to be in either the blue or the green regions, preferably the blue. And the reason for that is geometrically that is the hardest shot for the enemy to make. Now, the trouble that I have with this is that these regions are really small, so it can be kind of difficult to figure out what exactly you want to do when the enemy is right on top of you and you're kind of freaking out. So I have my own simpler theory that, while maybe not as optimal, will help you make decisions faster in the heat of the moment. And here it is. Everyone always pulls up. I'll explain what I mean. So there's two layers to this. The most basic layer is that every airframe will always pull positive Gs better than pulling negative Gs. So if you want to pull as hard as you can, you are going to be using up elevator. Now the second layer is that because of this, we are all psychologically trained to use up elevator as kind of the final adjustment that we're making when we're lining up for a shot. It doesn't matter if we're rolling over first or maybe we're, entering some kind of scissors. Right before we line up the shot, the last input that we give to the control surfaces is up elevator. Now, from this perspective, defensive flying becomes very simple. All you have to do is make sure that the enemy can't pull up into you, because pulling up into you is the only way that most pilots are comfortable getting the kill shot. Imagine drawing a line from wingtip to wingtip on the opponent's plane. If you are above this line, they can kill you. If you are below this line, they cannot. It's that simple. Or it would be, except for one small detail. You see, planes have this ability called rolling, which means that up and down are constantly changing throughout the dogfight. That means being too far below the opponent is actually a risk, because the opponent can simply roll over and suddenly you're very far above them. I'll cut to the chase. If you're in a situation where the opponent is catching you and you do not have enough time to pull out of the way, you want to put yourself in this position as quickly as possible. You want to point your cockpit in the opposite direction of the opponent's cockpit, so it's maximally annoying for them to roll back over on top of you. Now, of course, they could just try to pull down, negative G, and get the shot that way, but your airframe is lined up so that avoiding that shot is pulling up. And as we discussed before, planes don't like to pull down, they do like to pull up. So even if you're in a worse turning plane, most of the time you will be able to avoid that. If they instead try to roll over in order to get you above them again, they have to roll a full 180 degrees, which gives you lots of time to roll the other way and stay below their horizon, therefore denying them the shot. Now, one thing you might have already figured out from my description is that this strategy doesn't work very well when your plane has a substantially worse roll rate than the opponent. So imagine you're in a Spitfire and there's a Focke-Wulf on your 6. If you try to do this for too long, the Focke-Wulf's superior roll rate will make it so that they can catch you and force you into their kill zone a lot faster than you can roll out of the way. So in that situation, you have a lot less time to force them out in front of you than if it was the other way around. Now, of course, that doesn't mean this strategy is completely useless, because remember, all you're trying to do is buy yourself time so that the opponent misses the window of opportunity that they have before they overshoot. Really, this tactic should only be used as a last-ditch effort to survive if the enemy is right up on your 6, or if you're purposefully trying to fish for overshoots, like I'm about to demonstrate here. Alright, let's go back to the clip from the intro. So right here, I hear the engine sound at around the same time that I notice the red dot on my minimap, but it is way too late. I turn and there it is. It's a Tempest within 900 meters that has a significant energy advantage and is bearing straight down at me. And what do you know? It's caught me in a climb. This is a terrible situation, so there's only one thing to do. Assume the position. Now that wasn't a very fancy maneuver, but as you can see, my cockpit is now opposite the Tempest's cockpit, just like in that diagram, and I'm getting ready to pull out of the Tempest's guns even if it tries to pull negative Gs. From here, I have two goals. Number one, stay out of the Tempest's guns until it overshoots. In this situation, it's diving in from a very high altitude, it has a lot of speed, so thankfully this shouldn't take too long. The second thing is, I don't actually want to pull too far out of the Tempest's line of flight, because the moment it does overshoot, I want to be able to pull back in and shoot back. So once you get to this point, the strategy has kind of done its job. Once the enemy overshoots, you have a bunch of options. You can try to shoot back, you can try to run away, you can try to pull the enemy into a more even dogfight. In my case, I've managed to pull this off with a very small amount of distance between our planes, which means that pulling back in for a follow-up shot is really easy. Alright, now with that textbook paid actor example out of the way, let's try to break down a fight that's a bit messier. So in this example, I'm both in a worse airframe and also facing a 2v1 where both of the opponents have an energy advantage. There's this Tempest in front of me, and as my teammate is pointing out in the chat, there's a BF-109 behind me as well. So objectively speaking, I'm really out of options here. Thankfully, there are several teammates in the area that can come help me out as long as I manage to survive for long enough. So, once again, it is time to assume the position. So things get messy really quickly here because the Mauler doesn't have a good roll rate. I'm trying to make it so that my cockpit is opposite to the Tempest's cockpit, but he is able to keep up with the maneuver. So as you can see, I haven't fully managed to do the opposite cockpit's position, and in a second, he's going to catch up with me. And this is what I mean by if your plane has a worse roll rate, you really need to force the overshoot quickly. If I had even been like half a second late on trying to get this overshoot, I would have been dead for sure. As it was, I got lucky. I was in his kill box for a very brief amount of time, and he did get a shot in, but thankfully the Hispanos just ended up doing Hispano damage. Absolutely no time to take a breather though, because here comes the BF-109, and this time I do manage to get into the opposite cockpit position that I want. And this is a really good example of how, even in the situation where the opponent is willing to pull negative Gs to pull lead, because your plane has more control authority pulling up than the opponent's plane has pulling down, it's pretty easy to stay out of the opponent's line of fire. Like you see this BF-109 is just absolutely hosing me down, but I am able to just stay out of that stream of tracers. So once again, I'm trying to pull as little as possible out of the 109's line of fire, like just enough so he doesn't actually hit me, but Not so much that it's too difficult for me to snap back once he overshoots to get the counterattack. At this point, the fight is over. I've killed the BF-109, and the Tempest, while he's still a threat, he's decided that instead of continuing to engage me, he's going to run away because he doesn't want to be mobbed by the teammates that are now approaching me rapidly. That's kind of all the explanation that I have for how I try to approach this sort of defensive flying and trying to bait for overshoots. If you made it this far, I hope it's been helpful for you. If you're an experienced pilot yourself, please let me know in the comments if this is a similar or, completely different to how you treat defensive flying. And in the meantime, here's a few more clips for you.